So last week, we actually used Claude Code to build up a Fusion PBX instance just by prompting. This week, we're actually going to continue that process of actually adding extensions, setting up domains, setting up endpoint groups, all the things that's needed to actually make this PBX usable. We're going to start doing that today. But the first thing I want to actually understand is what files did Cloud Code create in the directory that we were using to run Cloud Code? What did it actually create? What artifacts did it create inside the directory? So we're going to go under the covers and figure out what it did. So let's go ahead and get started. So last week we were in this directory, static VoIP to agentic VoIP. And if I do a ls minus a, I can see that Claude left some remnants here, and we'll see what it left for us. It didn't leave much here actually. So settings.local, just some permission stuff, but it didn't leave anything of substance. And that must be because I didn't tell it to save these things to memory. Well, we'll dig into this and kind of figure out what it left. But the one thing we did do, if you remember, is that we created a file, a architectural document here, and so if we look at this, we just had to create the architecture for what we were building or how we would use Fusion PBX server. So I don't know, it'll read this information here. It says if you like it written to disk automatically, ask the main section to save it. Save the Fusion actually that instance has file writing permission. So we'll see how much it remembers. So let's jump into Claude. So let's go ahead and start up Claude Code and see if it remembers anything. Do you remember the Fusion PBX server we created? And I am going to assume that it doesn't because it has no history of that in this file, unless it's storing it somewhere else. Okay, cool. So there is all the information. Now, I'm curious now, where is it storing this information? And it gives me everything. It gives me all the information. So I'm going to ask it, where is this data stored? I thought it would be in the directory that we were in, unless, okay. Oh, all this stuff is in a memory file? Okay, so the info comes from persistent memory. Okay. So under user machendrix.claude projects, and then it gives the full path. This is where it stored that information. So it's not in the directory that we're currently in. It's in another directory off my user account on my Mac machine is where it's storing this information. Okay, so okay, so it says. Okay, one thing we're flagging the admin password says details are sitting in plain text in that MD file. Yep, I know that. If that's a concern, we can move it to somewhere else. So we will do that. All right, so it remembered, it basically stored what we were working on inside of a memory.md file in this directory here. So I guess the quick takeaway here is that, um, I thought the directory that we were actually in would be used to store our MD files or our memory files, but actually it stores in a different location. Now, I'm assuming the directory we're in, basically it has the reason. I'm not sure why they basically want me to run it from a particular directory, or they recommend you run it from a certain directory. I'm assuming it gives you access to a certain set of files in that directory, but we'll learn more about that. I'm kind of new to Claude Code as well, so I'm learning as we go. I use OpenClaw a lot, and the way it works is a little bit different. Not that different, but I'm getting used to it. So we're both learning together here. So all right. So the first thing we're going to do here is say, let's go ahead and so for those who don't know what Fusion, looks like, I think we probably just need to like log in real quickly and then kind of point out the areas that we're going to actually go and test. All right. All right, so now we're logged in. So what we're going to do today, the first thing we're going to do is have it create us a new domain so that we can start adding extensions to it. So domain is like, it's a multi-tenant system, and it's divided into domains. And so we're going to have it create multiple domains. We'll have it create another domain that way we can start doing our work. So the default domain here is 165.22.233.173, which is the IP address of the server. Typically in Fusion, you don't want to modify or add extensions to that particular domain. A lot of times what you'll do is that you will set up certain defaults, or you'll have certain things set up for inheritance so that it inherits like certain parameters and settings from this root domain is what we're going to call it. It's 165. But we're going to create a brand new domain. So that's the first thing we're going to have it do. Sure. I mean, I can go here and say, add domain, without a problem. But the whole goal here is to kind of see how can we, set this up so that AI can do these, and what can it do on its own easily. Again, some things are going to be like super expensive from a token perspective to do. And probably creating a domain is probably one of those. We can just click on the domain and do it. Or we can use an API to do that or something of that nature. But our whole goal here is just to kind of see how far we can get, using agentic AI to do that. All right, so let's go back to our screen here and our terminal, and let's see if we can have it create a domain for us and see if it even understands what that is. So create a domain in Fusion PBX called, let's call it our, I don't know what I want to call it. I'm going to call it Kimbrew, my mom's maiden name. So called Kimbrew, and then with an extension, um, with 5 extensions. Let's just see if we say with 5 extensions, what is it going to do? Create a domain in Fusion is called Kimbrew with 5 extensions. So let's see what it does. So it's thinking through what tooling is available for doing this. So we'll see what it comes up with. Now, what it's basically saying is that, hey, it uses PHP for this, so I'm going to go ahead and build you something, a script in order to do this. Now, these things take tokens for it to build these things up. Um, I don't know. We'll see how many tokens it takes to do this task. In some cases, it may be better to use an API to do this. So we've built an API called MeltAPI, which you can install, and it works with FusionPBX in regards to being able to provide an API interface for being able to do things such as creating domains and extensions. So obviously, we could tell it to install that. We'll see what the difference is in tokens. Like, what's the difference between it going off creating a script to do this and doing it itself, or having it install an API and then using the API to do it. So we'll see if we can we're going to see if we can compare that. So maybe that's a good test for the day. So kind of making this up as I go. Okay. What should the domain name be for Kimbrew? This is the domain extension register. Oh, Lisa is thoughtful enough to ask us what should we name our domain. I'm going to just do number one, and then also ask me how should the five extensions be numbered and secured. So that was nice for it to ask as well, right? So it could have it could have just created some on its own, but it asks us do you want to create these extension numbers, and do you want the passwords to be random? So I'm just going to take one, right? And then I'm going to say submit my answers, and then we're going to see how long and how much will this cost us to do. That's the thing I want to understand. All right, so it actually is creating a script for being able um, to set up to add users here. So, which is fine. It creates a new database to see here, and then it creates it there. So, I'll say, yep. Go ahead and create that. Okay, wrote the file. So it wrote the file locally, then it's going to SSH it to the box in the temp directory. All right, so let's say yes. All right. And it says, look at that. It says done. The domain and all the 5 extensions are live and verified end to end. The domain is this. Here goes the credentials. It created a voicemail pin, and it created yeah, it looks good. All right, so look at this. So and it's even giving us tips on what we need to do. So it tells us how it was ran. I ran Fusion PBX on PBX classes via CLI script on the server that mirrors exactly what the web UI does. And then it says rather than raw SQL, so nothing Fusion respects was skipped. It's idempotent, safe to rerun. It skips everything already present. Then um, reload XML and plus reload echo. So so good. So it does everything that the UI would do is doing. And then it says two notes. Um, this domain name doesn't have an A record yet, so phones can register fine by pointing at the IP. But if you want the fully qualified to resolve, add this in the test.dcip zone. Want me to check and add that these credentials are in this chat and in temp of the server. Delete the temp script. So so it's good. So it's basically, telling us everything it did, and it's basically saying, hey, when you get done, I can delete everything, and that way, you don't have passwords sitting here in clear text on your file system. So, all right, so that actually wasn't that's not bad. So it says, I want to ask it, tokens, um, how many tokens slash cost was for this task? Okay, so I can look at this. So let's go, I can just go cost and it should tell me. So this session costed me $1.17. So that's not bad. That's not too bad. Uh, you know, so it's pretty dope that it only cost you $1.17. So let's go look at what it actually did for us. So let's switch over to our browser and let's go look at um, what it, what it actually did. We may have to relog in. No, that's good. So it actually did a reload and everything. So let's go ahead and click manage, go to that domain, and then we're going to go look at the extensions that was created here. Yeah, look at that. So it looks good. Um, yeah. So it looks like it created everything that was needed. So that's pretty cool. So let's now so we now know that the cost here. Let me just take this cost down. We do a screenshot of this cost. Right, this is what it costs: $1.17 to do. And let me just store this somewhere. All right. So let's now use the Melt API. So for those who don't know, we've created an API called Melt. And what Melt is a standard API for revisioning PBXs. So the first Fusion PBX is the first one we created it for. So we're going to use this. It's free for one Fusion PBX server and one domain, community support, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to now use that. So now we're going to say, let's use the Melt API located at meltapi.com to create another domain called ornsb.test.dsabrowser.net. Yeah. All right. And have it create 5 extensions. All right, so let's go see how that works. So I'm just going to have it do number 2, proceed. You want to fetch the content to yes. Okay. So we're just waiting. We're just letting it build this up here. All right. So it's starting to understand the architecture of Melt. And so it runs with the Docker engine. So it's not installed, and there's a no public hosted API. It's just the marketing site. To actually use MeltAPI, I have to install it on the FusionPBX box. So basically, it's saying, hey, I need to install a Docker engine, pulls and runs the container, a trust line, letting FusionPBX DB user connect to local host, opens up a port 99 IP table and generates a Melt API token into the root.bash. It's reversible. Uninstall. Okay, so yeah. So we're going to do, sure, we're going to install it. Let's see here. Now, the one thing that it may cost a little bit more is that initially it has to install the API onto the Fusion PBX box, but that's a one-time thing. So, but we still need to take into account that that it has to do it. So, so obviously, right there, the cost is probably going to be a little bit higher than just simply creating a PHP script to be able to set up the domain and have the users. Yeah, already I can tell this is going to cost more initially because of the amount of time it needs to take to understand the API and then install it. But from there, it should go fast. So we'll have to test it again once it's installed. How long will it take? Okay, it looks like it created the domain. And then now it's going to let me create the extensions. So let's go see how this is on. All 5 created via the Melt API. And okay. Okay. So all right, so it's verifying everything's working. There goes all the users. There goes the passwords. All right. And then it tells us what the difference is. Hmm. So Melt API's domain create only inserts the domain row. It does not import the per domain dial plans. So Orangeby has 0 dial plans. Kimbrew, which I built through FusionPBX own classes, has 32 extensions. Has 32 extensions will register, but internal extension calling and feature codes, etc., won't route until the default dial plans are imported for this domain. I can fix this in one step. So also note the DNS forms isn't set. To cleanup mode is now running persistently on the server. Yes, yes. I want to say yes. Save a memory note about this. Okay, interesting. So when we built Melt API, it was older release of Fusion PBX. So we would just create the extension, create the domain and the extension, and we didn't really create any dial plans. We kind of left it up to the user to add dial plans. So what we're going to do based on this, I'm actually going to go and update the Melt API to actually create the dial plans when it actually gets created. But that's for another time. But I'm just, this was interesting for me just to see how much, what was the difference in time. So we're going to look at the for the session that we've been running. Um, yeah. So let's go look at the cost now. So this is going to give us the cost that's been running. Um, so so before we spent um, $1.17 to get an domain and extension built. Now it cost us, let's see here, 3.76 minus 117. So it cost us 259. So it cost us about a little bit over twice as much in order to get it done. But this was because we also had to install it. So let's look at this and let's compare it again by adding now I'm going to have, now that Melt API is created, this is the Melt cost with with installation of Melt API and creating a domain and extensions. So I'm just taking a couple of notes, and it was came out to be the difference was 2.9. So it cost almost twice as much to create a domain and 5 extensions. All right, so we got that. So now what I want to do, now that we understand that, now that we did this, now I'm going to have it go ahead and create. Now that Melt is installed, I'm going to have it create another dial plan and 5 extensions. Now it doesn't need to install the Melt API. So let's see, how fast it is or how slow it is. So create another domain using the Melt API called hendrix.test.dciprouter.net with 5 extensions. No need to prompt me. Um, just complete the task. Okay, so let's see what is here. All right, that was fast. Now that Melt API is created, um, let's see here. So now, all right, so now our set, it was $3.99. So let me take, our cost was $3.99. So I'm going to say Melt API cost with just creating a domain and extensions. So it was $3.99. This last one minus 3.76. So it's 23 cents. Cost was 23 cents. That's pretty dope. That because it doesn't have to go figure out anything because it knows how to use the API. So the first time basically you'll take a hit for installing an API such as the Melt API, and then but after it's installed, now it's going to be real quick for the actual the LLM to be able to use it as a tool to create additional extensions and domains. So that was pretty cool. That's a pretty cool takeaway. Is that a couple of things? One is that it was able to go grab an API, install it, and then use that API to be able to create new domains or extensions. And on top of that, once it got installed, it took a little hit in regards to time and tokens to get it installed. But once it got installed, it was able to do it, basically 5 times faster than, when we had the Claude use PHP to create a little script in order to build up a domain and an extension. So at the end of the day, long term, leveraging an API is much better than having LLM go and build a script and run it each time. Now, however, once that script is built, you could probably use that script over and over again if it was set up properly. So that's the only caveat to that. Most cases, you probably want to use an API because um, you probably don't want to be SSHing and using Claude Code to SSH directly into the box. That's probably not a great pattern to have. You usually will probably want to have use the API to be able to remotely make calls to it. So we can kind of play around with that as well and kind of figure out, what would be, what would that look like inside of Claude Code, actually having it, now that the Melt API is installed, having it actually just send RESTful API request versus actually using SSH to communicate with the API locally. So a lot more things to go and figure out and test. But again, the whole point of this is to better understand how these LLMs would work with building up VoIP infrastructure. And part of that of having VoIP infrastructures, having the ability to set up, domains or new tenants and having it automatically go create some extensions automatically, or on your behalf, not necessarily automatically, but on your behalf. So that's what I think is pretty cool. So I'll be back next week, and we'll talk more about, we'll continue down our journey of using agentic AI to build VoIP infrastructure. All right, take care.